Welcome to the training course, Digital Presentation and Preservation of European Ritual Cuisine. Module 2 Basic Theory and Practice, Theoretical Foundations of Photography. The photographic genres. Color photography. Black and white and monochrome photography. Food photography. This lesson aims to provide students with the basic notions and concepts related to different photographic genres. At the end of the lesson, the students will know the main techniques for the realization of photographs concerning the photographic genres of color and black, and with photography and food photography. Black and white photography was born out of a technical lack. When photography was invented, there was no technology that made it possible to capture colors. It was necessary to wait until 1935, when Kodak invented color film. But still today, we continue to photograph in black and white. Indeed, this kind of photography has taken on an artistic value over time, so much so that an artistic photograph can only be in black and white. We can add that, when cameras used photographic film, when you wanted to photograph, you had to choose whether to use a color film or a black and white one. Today our cameras allow us to choose in the post-production phase which of the two types of photos we want in the final rendering. However, photographing in black and white must always be an a priori and not a posteriori choice, because black and white photography follows very specific rules as what color can express, in black and white photography, is expressed by the composition, from light and shadows, from lines and shapes. To get a good black and white photograph, it is not enough to simply convert a digital color photo to black and white or shoot with black and white film. If we want to take attractive black and white photographs, we must pay attention to the lights and shadows. We must train our eye to see the world around us in black and white, to dwell on the fundamental elements of monochrome photography and understand how to use the contrast of grays in our favor. Some photographs look beautiful in color, but when transformed into monochromatic photos, they lose intensity and appear flat and insignificant. The black and white images highlight some elements that in color photography are overshadowed by color contrasts. For example, a photo of a green plant with red berries will have a lot of contrast in a color image, and it will immediately catch our eye, but if we convert it to shades of gray, the same image will appear dull. The greens and reds will in fact become similar gray tones, leaving the scene with little tonal contrast. Let's see below the essential elements of a grayscale photo. Composition. Composition is one of the most important aspects of a good photograph. The compositional choice consists in the arrangement of the visual elements within the frame of a photograph. In black and white photography, due to the absence of color, the composition will be very important if not essential for obtaining a good photograph. Among the main forms of photographic composition that we can use in black and white photography should be counted, the pattern, light forms and dark forms that alternate. In this case, the photograph becomes another thing compared to the initial image. The pattern becomes the subject of the composition by delegating the real subject of the photograph to the second scene. Symmetry, especially in black and white photography, symmetry can become the fulcrum of the composition, benefited by the fact that the absence of colors leads the attention to focus on the essential. Shapes and lines. If we think of photographic composition as a set of shapes and lines, black and white photography, with its contrasts between light and dark, will only accentuate this characteristic of the composition. Light is the fundamental element of any type of photography. Any photo comes from the light which, depending on its quality and directionality, draws the shapes and volumes of the objects represented. In black and white photography, however, lighting becomes more important as we do not have the availability of visual information on color. Lighting determines not only the brightness and darkness of an image, but also the tone and atmosphere of the same. But also the shadows that the light draws are very important. In fact, one of the first things to remember when shooting in black and white is that the shadows have an essential impact. They are not only the darkest parts of a photograph, they are decisive elements in the compositional choice, and sometimes even, the very subject of the images. The shadows will be allied to highlight the details of the composition. The shadows will also offer a great capacity for contrast that will add character to the images and texture to the subject. To understand color photography, it is first necessary to define what color is. Color comes from light. The objects around us are hit by the white sunlight. Part of this light is absorbed by the object, while a part is reflected. The wavelength of the reflection determines the color of the object we are observing. As for color, there are three properties to consider: hue, brightness, and saturation. Hue is the name we give to colors: red, green, yellow, etc. The brightness is the amount of reflected light. The more light is reflected, the closer the perceived color will be to white. Saturation is the intensity of the hue. We can go from an intense and bright magenta to a dull red. When you bring the saturation to 0, you get to gray. Colors are classified into primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary, subtractive, colors are fundamental colors because they cannot be obtained by mixing any other color and are red, magenta, blue, cyan, and yellow. All the others are obtained from the primary colors by mixing them. Secondary colors are obtained by mixing two primary colors together in equal quantities. Each pair of primary colors mixed together generates a secondary color. Tertiary colors are obtained by mixing primary colors in different parts. The human eye is much more complex and records colors better than the camera. The human eye records colors, corrects the light, and we can see them as they are. The camera, on the other hand, is conditioned by the type of light with which we are photographing, for example sunlight or tungsten light or fluorescent light. A fundamental value regarding light is the color temperature. Each light source has its own color temperature: sun, halogen light bulb, incandescent light bulb, neon, flash, are all light sources, each characterized by a different color temperature, and which therefore affects the scene. Color temperature in photography is measured in degrees Kelvin, K. The color temperature scale visible to the human eye ranges from 1700 degrees Kelvin to 12,000 degrees Kelvin. At higher Kelvin temperatures, the color temperature is cooler. The light from a 5000 degrees Kelvin flash is cool. At lower Kelvin temperatures, the color temperature is warmer. For example, a candle has a color temperature of 1000 degrees Kelvin, but its light is warm. The color temperature of a sunny day at noon is 5600 degrees Kelvin, but when the day is cloudy the color temperature rises, from 6500 degrees Kelvin to 8000 degrees Kelvin. A clear, cloudless sky has a color temperature that can reach 27,000 degrees Kelvin. When we take a photograph, we must therefore take into account the type of light we have on the scene. To obtain the colors we see with our eyes, we must tell our camera what the natural white corresponds to on our scene. This process is called white balance. Through the white balance we can cancel the color casts given by the color temperature of the light sources that illuminate the scene. If you know the color temperature, you can neutralize its effects. In digital cameras, white balance is a setting that tells the camera what color temperature white can appear. For example, in ambient light they have 3200 degrees Kelvin, in sunlight 5500 degrees Kelvin. To obtain a correct white balance in the camera, we can set the automatic white balance, and then leave it to your digital camera, which will evaluate the scene and set it automatically based on the parameters set by the manufacturer in relation to the color temperature. We can observe the scene trying to understand which light sources are illuminating it, and then set one of the modes provided by the camera: tungsten, about 3000 degrees Kelvin, fluorescent lamps, 4000 degrees Kelvin, daylight, 5500 degrees Kelvin, flash, 5900 degrees Kelvin, cloudy, 6000 degrees Kelvin, shaded 7000 degrees Kelvin. We can set a white balance manually. To do this we have to photograph a white sheet within the scene and tell the camera that that is natural white. Color is everywhere. We are surrounded by it, we cannot avoid it, and therefore we tend to take it for granted when we take a picture. To avoid mediocre photos we must instead give importance to colors. We can have a photo where there are few colors but they are dominant. The composition that must be simple and linear is very important in this case. Let's have the color wheel in mind. If you want to create a photo with a feeling of calm and relaxation, we use colors that are close to each other on the wheel. If we want to create a photo with high color contrast, we use the colors that are on opposite sides of the wheel. Color has emotional value. Observing the colors in a photo, we feel emotions. The same color can evoke different emotions depending on the context in which it is used. It can also provoke different emotional responses in some people than others. But in general, colors cause a similar universal response. Red, for example, is a warm color. It can also mean danger or anger. Blue is cool and soothing, but it can also be a cold, frosty color. Imagine a dark, wintry scene with snow and ice. In the times of social media, where the image has acquired extraordinary importance, a new genre of photography has rapidly developed: food photography. This new genre has had a notable boost also thanks to famous TV programs that have food and cooking as their object. Thanks to social media, photographing food has become a craze. Immortalizing the dishes before tasting them has almost become a ritual, a gesture that you can no longer give up. The growing spread of smartphones equipped with state-of-the-art cameras, in addition to the popularity of social media such as Instagram and Facebook, have contributed to increasing the fame of food photography and making it affordable for everyone and not just for marketing. Food photography is definitely a very funny genre, but it is not a taken-for-granted photograph. However, it hides many pitfalls which, if not managed in the right way, lead to sensational disasters. We need to understand some basic things and tackle this photographic technique starting from the bottom, in a simple way. In this photographic genre, light acquires an even more important value and must be kept under control. In food photography, the first thing to do is to take care of the preparation of the food. Most professional food photographers hardly ever use real food for their shots. Usually the dishes are replaced by imitations artfully built with the most unexpected materials, such as glue or engine oil. The motor oil turns into a photogenic and very thick syrup for pancakes, or the shoe polish simulates the streaks of the grill on steaks that are still raw. In this way the meat retains all its juices and natural shine, giving the food photographer on duty more time to get the perfect shot. In food photography, the first thing to do is to take care of the preparation of the food. Most professional food photographers hardly ever use real food for their shots. Usually the dishes are replaced by imitations artfully built with the most unexpected materials, such as glue or engine oil. The motor oil turns into a photogenic and very thick syrup for pancakes, or the shoe polish simulates the streaks of the grill on steaks that are still raw. In this way the meat retains all its juices and natural shine, giving the food photographer on duty more time to get the perfect shot. Furthermore, behind each image there are several people who each take care of an aspect of the photograph. For example, The food stylist takes care of serving the food so that it is beautiful and photogenic for the set. The prop stylist, on the other hand, devotes himself to the preparation of the scenography and is able to choose and combine the right elements on the scene to build a background that can enhance the textures and colors of the food to be photographed. But if we want to learn how to photograph food and dishes and we are not professional food photographers, we can try to do it keeping in mind a few basic concepts. Natural light is ideal for food photography, but it has the drawback that it cannot be directed as smoothly as artificial light. When photographing food, it's like taking portraits, direct light is hardly ever used. It is therefore always better to use a diffuser, which can also be a simple sheet, between the light source and the center of the scene, in order to soften shadows and lights and disperse the sun's rays in the desired points. The ideal would be to have a study with a large window that illuminates the environment. The flash should not be used as it generates harsh light and creates shadows that are difficult to control. As for shooting angles, the two most used angles are 45 degrees and 90 degrees. The second, in particular, is the most common because the shots from above suggest the point of view of those who are eating, involving the viewer more in the photo. Composition is one of the foundations of photography that allows the human eye to read photographs and identify points of interest in the image in a few seconds. In food photography, knowing the rules of composition takes on even more importance, since the whole scene must be studied and built from scratch. It is not a question of portraying moving subjects, but of immortalizing inanimate objects that we can only give life to through good image design. As a general rule, it must be borne in mind that the food must be placed on one of the thirds or directly in the center of the image, depending on the setting that has been decided to prepare. Food photography does not require wide shots, so you will need to close the shots. Necessarily therefore, the lenses to be used do not have to be wide-angle. The best lenses for photographing food are medium telephoto or telephoto lenses, therefore lenses with focal lengths between 50 mm and 150 mm. The use of these lenses will also allow us to have a wide focal aperture that will give our photographs a pleasant bokeh effect that will attract the viewer's eye to the lawn of our photographs, that is the food. Another very important aspect is the color. Of course, the photographs of the food will be in color and it will be very important to bring out the colors. The background must be of a neutral color, the dishes on which the food will be placed must be of a dark or neutral color to bring out the colors of the food. Another important factor to consider will be the white balance, so that the colors of the dishes are as natural as possible. The course was created by the consortium of the Eurica project funded by the Erasmus Plus program. Thanks for the attention.